Good evening. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
When we have meetings like tonight, this is why I need a new commission room, right? Almost standing room only. Thank you that came. Roll call, please.
Gehrig?
Here.
Grinberg?
Here.
Pepcorn?
Here.
Strand?
Here.
Mahoney?
Here. Announcements. Fire Department Chief Steve Dirksen has been selected to serve as the Vice Chairman for the Commission on Fire Accreditation International by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. How many years is that for, Chief?
Until they kick me off.
Oh, wow. So you're going to help take care of fire prevention throughout the country, right? That's what that does?
Accreditation.
Yeah, and throughout the world, because it's international.
It's international.
No trips to Paris, okay? Health, beginning January 15th, the art class will be offered to the current and former guests at the Gladys Ray Shelter. The program will offer a variety of art projects as therapeutic opportunity for those who are experiencing homelessness, with the goal of working to build social equality. The Gladys Ray Shelter and Creative Plains Foundation have teamed up with the presentation partners in the Fargo Police Department to offer this unique opportunity once a month through April. A meal during the session will be offered. Also, Fargo Coast Public Health reminds the public that flu shots are still available. The Fargo Coast Public Health Immunization Program offers flu shots for ages 6 months to older. Inspections. This is an interesting year for us. The city issued building permits worth $515 million in 2018. That's 8% up from 2017. Commercial construction was at $226 million, with the largest three projects, Block 9, Border States Electric Headquarters, and the Dillard Building on Robert Street. There were more than 1,200 new housing units permitted, including 914 multi-units, 278 single-family units, and 35 attached housing units. Now, Chad Olson, in contrast, said in Dilworth they had 8 out of 10 homes built this year, so I just want to show there is a remarkable difference, John, what we do in Fargo. There was $50 million worth of public projects, including the wastewater treatment plant, Sodro Hall at NDSU, and Deer Creek Elementary School. So we normally used to run about 200 to 250 million a year. 515 is a lot of permits. The Fargo Public Library circulates 1.026.953 print and digital items in 2018, which breaks a previous record of 1,004,000 units in 2015. In addition to the record number of items checked out in 2018, the library also set a record for attendance of library programs and events last year at 27,607. Thanks, Tim. Good work. Police. With the growth of the city, it has been a challenge for the police department to deal with repeat criminal offenders due to short incarceration times. The police department has done a remarkable job of holding down crime rates and utilizing intelligent-led policing to identify and go after people who are driving up the crime rate. The police department's efforts have become a model for other police departments and that other police departments are interested in emulating. Chief Todd said his department is right on track and he will continue to lead and grow in these efforts. And he's available to the press afterwards. Now, I think this is in preparation for his completion of police headquarters, is why you told me this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. MatBus provided 2,014,738 passenger rides in 2018, an increase of 6% from 2017. There was also a 20% reduction in mechanical missed trips and 1.14% fixed route, and a 58% paratransit reduction in call times. Other interesting statistics from the MatBus in 2018 was social media, website, rider alert, and MedBus app usage increased up by 68%. Other. Livability.com has released a list of the 10 best places to move to get a fresh start in 2019. From starting a new business to getting active to jump-starting a career, Fargo was named number 5 as best place to start your own business due to the culture, growth, affordable cost of living, and thriving startup scene. Cleveland got number 1. Iowa City still is one of our competitors, and Black Mountain, North Carolina was number 4. Construction crews at the Block 9 building are beginning to ramp up to start above-grade concrete pours in the tower and precast assembly in the parking ramp. Current construction crews number 75 and are expected to be 90 in the next few weeks. The tower is expected to have a structural full height of 235 feet by late this fall, and the ramp precast structure will be fully assembled by next spring, early summer. A lot of people are sitting in the Skyway and watching the growth, so if you're ever bored for a thing to do, just go in the Skyway and look out the windows. We have a lot of people watching. I'd also like to welcome Derek Fletcher. Is he here today, Derek? And Derek is going to be our new creative service producer and will be working to create impactful videos on behalf of the city departments. You will also see him assisting Brian in operating the various pieces of technology in commission chambers and recording some of our various meetings. He'll be a busy guy. Commissioners, I suggest you get to know him because he'll make you look your best. Thanks, Derek. Approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of agenda moving items 4 and 7 from the consent agenda to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 2nd, 2019 regular meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 1 through 29, excluding items 4 and 7, which have been moved to the regular agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Regular agenda, item 30, explanation by Jeremy Gordon on the recommendations for on-street parking. Jeremy, you ready to go?
Yep. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. This item in front of you is with regards to the Block 9 project. Should be relatively straightforward. Typically, we in engineering and planning don't usually see when street parking changes happen, they're usually as a result of one of our projects. When we reconstruct a street, we look at the options of how we should put it back together, and then we make a conscious decision. Not very often a block gets redone by a private developer and they have ideas to how to change things. So this is unique, but I don't think it's the first time it's ever happened. Sometimes it gets redeveloped the same time we're working in the street. So knowing this is pretty unique and there's a lot of things going on here, we had the developer talk to the Parking Commission, to the Downtown Community Partnership Board of Directors, to our Traffic Tech Advisory Committee, and then our Public Works Committee. So you will be the fifth body to hear this and hopefully vote on it. So just to highlight, the plaza in the southwest corner, there'll be no parking around that. So the half block on Broadway and the half block on 2nd Avenue, the parking will be removed to make more room for the plaza. Moving north on Broadway, that'll be switched from diagonal to parallel, and 3 of those spots will be a drop-off zone to be used for valet parking. And as you wrap around 3rd Avenue, that half block, it's shown as just the red 4 spots, but these 6 spots would be zoned 15-minute parking, so we'd have some high turnover there. And then the east end of the block would just be from diagonal to parallel, and then 5th Street pretty much remains unchanged. So with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Questions, any commissioners? Very cool. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? And this was vetted with everybody downtown, so they are understanding of it, and then your parking commission also voted on it as well, I take it, Chairman?
Yeah, the DCP Board of Directors, I'm sure it's been well vetted by the folks that are downtown.
Okay.
And that's why we made them go through so many commissions and committees.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item 31, I have my recommendation to appoint Heather Keeler Johnson to the Native American Commission. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Second, moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. I suppose we could go to small cells. You probably get that in before 15.
Can you hear me now?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Brenda and Nancy are both ill, so I will be tackling this by myself. So this is some work we've been doing on small cells, and I'll get into more of the FCC rulings and stuff like that order that we're into effect, but there's a letter from Nancy explaining some of the ordinance changes that we need to do to bring ourselves in compliance, along with some handouts and things that you're working on. The original ordinance was first passed in January of 2017, so about 2 years ago. We did update the guidelines by resolution to accommodate Wi-Fi in the public right-of-way in September of 17. The current ordinance, as I said, and guideline updates are needed to comply with an FCC order dated September 26th of last year. The effective date of the FCC order is today. So the highlights of that order are basically a state or local governments cannot prohibit deployment in any way. Fee restrictions, they're based on actual costs to administer and review the process, or actual costs incurred by local governments or state governments. They must be reasonable to the applicant, along with fair to all the competitors. In addition, the aesthetics, they have to be reasonable, no more restrictive or burdensome than other infrastructure deployments, and they must be published in advance. In addition, they also gave us some shot clocks, they're calling them. So basically, once we receive an application, the shot clock starts, and we have 60, 90, or 150 days to review and approve that application for small cells. So that starts very quickly. So in your packet, there's a pretty extensive list of things you need to have for an application. You can review that later. So the current fee schedule as adopted in 2017, so basically the application fee was $100 per site, phase one. And that was kind of a preliminary design, preliminary look at things. If that went through without many questions, or was actually got approved, went to a phase two, and there was a tiered approach to phase two. So some fees that were associated with, and this is really covering the cost of reviewing the application. After that, the annual fee was $1,500 per attachment to the city structure. And then there was a master attachment agreement fee of $1,500 at a 10-year renewal. So as you look at this, the FCC order basically says reasonable fees could be no more than $270 per site. So it can still be lower than what is in our current guidelines. In addition, the application fee is limited to $500 for up to 5 sites, and you can charge an extra $100 after 5. Now, if we could track costs and actually get the actual cost, there might be an opportunity to charge more if that's what you want to do. But we just that's what the FCC ordered. So, proposed fees for the City of Fargo, as we looked at it from engineering, went through PUPEC, we're proposing an annual fee of $175 per site. You may wonder why we're even going lower. Minnesota has a state statute limiting the yearly charges to $175. Verizon has been in and basically said, if you want it, that's what we're going to pay, or we're going to go someplace else and we'll spend our budget money elsewhere until Fargo either comes down or until that's the only place that's left to put them is small cell deployments at $270. So we're recommending $175. The application fee as per FCC order, $500 for up to 5 sites, an additional $100. We're eventually going to go to a master attachment agreement when we're all done, 10-year agreement. We will come back after the ordinance is final and talk to you about adding a recommendation to bill the applicant for the legal costs of preparing that master attachment agreement. And then the other item we have to work on is if they don't want to use one of our poles, there is a fee to use our right-of-way with a pole of their own. And then we'll come back with that after we've adopted the ordinance. Talking about applicant responsibilities. So the applicant is responsible for upgrading the footing and the pole, because you're going to add about up to 75 pounds for a small cell on top of the pole. You need a little meatier structure to do that. They'll install a new LED fixture, and they will provide replacement poles in the event of a knockdown. So we'll have a small inventory. So as they move into town, we'll have some of their poles, and we'll have the ability to use their poles in the event of a knockdown. So you may wonder what are we looking at for installations? We're thinking 15 to 25 per year, maybe per carrier. We really don't know. We're anticipating a whole lot more requests once the FCC order is effective. We've been on webinars, some national presentations. Nancy's attended some IMLA calls. They're saying an estimated 60 small cells per carrier per square mile. So if you look at the city of Fargo at about 50 square miles, there could be 12,000 of these in the city of Fargo. So the numbers get big in a hurry. So with that, questions?
Question, Mr. Pepper?
So, Mr. Chair, first of all, I'd like to welcome Kevin to our staff. This is the first time he's presented, and he's joined our engineering staff. Obviously, he was with the State Highway Department for a long time. We're very fortunate to have him, so welcome and thank you for joining our staff. So I just have a couple quick points, kind of, not so much questions, but to me, because obviously small cells, it's technology in the future, but the thing that concerns me is each separate carrier has to have their own small cells, and so if you've been to other cities where they have them, if we start putting up that, it's just going to be clutter, I believe, and so can you just talk about that? Is there some way we can limit that? Is there, in the future, do you think they can all be on one? Just if you could talk about that, I'd appreciate it.
The only conversations I've been involved in is with Verizon. They're saying no. Sometimes you get interference between the two devices, so they can't go maybe on the same pole. I do have some pictures here where you can see, here's a picture of two different providers, and I don't know, as you guys look at that, it's probably hard to see a lot of this detail, but so there's some worry about interference, who owns the pole, and all these things that go with it. So they're reluctant to really talk about that, at least the one provider that we've talked about or talked to.
But, Mr. Chair, so I just think it's something that I think the neighborhoods, it's going to be visual clutter at a certain point. And so I think that needs to be on our radar, that we try to reduce that as much as possible. And I don't know, but on the flip side, we want to have technology available for everybody. So it's just one of those things.
Eric Johnson?
Yeah, Commissioner Pepcorn, I can help a little bit. I know Nancy and Brenda were working on aesthetic guidelines that are in the document here that are intended to address those very concerns as best as a city can do. There's a sort of tension between the Federal Communications Commission regulations that are promoting, understandably, promoting a desire on the part of society to have good connectivity, but at the same time, the impacts on the city are also significant, and you're mentioning one of those. So the idea is to get this on board in a timely manner so we can get our toe in the door.
And I would add in the guidelines that we're asking to adopt by resolution as well as there is some wording in there that if the FCC order was to be overturned, challenged, whatever words we want to use, we may revert to something different and have more control. But right now with the current FCC order, it's really hard to have a lot of control over placement, number of poles, all those items.
Do we need to make any motion tonight other than take and receive, and you'll bring an ordinance back?
It'd be nice,
I think there's a suggested motion on Nancy's letter.
Yeah.
Which I can pull up here in a moment.
Right here.
It involves approving the guidelines as well as the
Yes.
waiving first reading, I believe.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Garrick?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. We'll go to public hearings. Item 32A, transfer of Class C alcoholic beverage license for Men's Hair World, doing business at Hair Salon of Men's Hair World, doing business as Men's Hair World at 1801 45th Street South, Suite L1. It's continued from our 1/2/19 meeting. Steve Sprague to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So we did have this as a public hearing 2 weeks ago, at which time the applicant explained that she has set forth a plan to address some of the concerns that were in the background check. I did speak to her just recently, and she does have it's basically a 12-week plan to clear up the debt that she has, and then she would meet the qualifications that we have. Now, to me, there are probably three options. I've vetted these with the police chief. One would be to deny, as we had recommended. Number two would be to delay the 12 weeks and then see if she's met that. Or the third option, we could approve it and then with the condition that if she falls off the plan and doesn't get it approved or get the debt cleared up by renewal time, which is coming up in June, then she would know at this point right now that it wouldn't be renewed. And really, talking to the chief, I think that's probably the way to move forward is to approve this license now, the transfer, and then we'll monitor it. And if we haven't seen the debt cleared up by by a renewal time, then she would know at this point that that wouldn't be renewed.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this transfer? Anyone present who wishes to speak? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, Steve, maybe the applicant at the last meeting mentioned that some of this circumstances came from medical debt. Is that in fact the case?
She's here.
Nope.
Or did I maybe misunderstood her? Pardon me? You misunderstood. Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item 32B, plat of Craig's Oaks Grove addition, a vacation plat at 5th Avenue North and an alley, and a replat of Block 27, part of Block 28, and the vacated portions of Elm Street, Block 28 Alley and 5th Street North. Kenny and Devine's second addition, including subdivision waiver to reduce the size of a cul-de-sac and a right-of-way name change, 43, 44, 48 5th Street Avenue North, 10, 14, 22 6th Avenue North, and 501, 509, 515, 519 Oak Street North. Approval recommended by the Planning Commissioner. Donald Crest to explain.
Good evening, Commissioners. Donald Kress of the Department of Planning and Development. As the Mayor has stated, this is item 32B, a major plat of Craig's Oak Grove addition. Commissioners, please note that this plat includes a vacation of public right-of-way. And since that is the case, approval of this plat would require a vote of 4 of the 5 commissioners present, or 4 of the 5 commissioners. This is a requirement of state statute governing vacation of public right-of-way and is not related to any protest. That's just a standard requirement for vacation of right-of-way. The project site is located, as the Mayor stated here, on Oak Street and 6th Avenue North. Here's the railroad. Here's the city's levee over here. Here, of course, is the Red River. The zoning here, we see there are 10 lots altogether. 7 of them are zoned MR2, which is a multi-dwelling residential zoning, and these 3 purple ones here are zoned DMU. The plat proposes to plat all 10 lots into a single lot, and the 2 zonings will remain on that lot. So we'll have one lot, the black line here, the dark black line, with 2 zonings on it. This PUD, or planned unit development you see noted here, is actually left over from an earlier proposed development on this site. That is just sitting there right now. Your commission is not voting on that at all tonight. That's just there because it was approved back in 2016. When the developer goes forward to redevelop this project, we imagine that he will modify or perhaps remove that. But there is no zoning that your commission is voting on tonight. It's just the platting. As we noted here, there are some right-of-way modifications here. These graphics were prepared by case planner Aaron Nelson, and these are the same ones that are in your packet. Here we see that there is a alley and part of 5th Avenue here that is going to be vacated, and then this portion of right-of-way is dedicated for a cul-de-sac. Oak Street is just going to terminate here in a cul-de-sac. As you saw, we'll go back for the plat for a minute here. You see that cul-de-sac right there on the plat. And then here's the, a little more superimposed on the aerial photo what that cul-de-sac will look like. And there also is a subdivision waiver related to this, reducing the diameter of the cul-de-sac and the paving diameter of the cul-de-sac, and not requiring a sidewalk along the cul-de-sac. What will happen here is the sidewalk will still be along both sides of Oak Street, and that will serve these parcels here. As you see, this cul-de-sac is a little off-center. It's a little leaning toward the east there because we're putting it in after the fact. And so we'll, as you see in these findings stated in your staff report, that staff does support this modification because it's because of the situation here, but still adequate sidewalks will be provided to connect these developments with the rest of the city's public sidewalk system. There's also some flood protection involved in this. Here's the city's existing levee. The applicant will be granting the city a flood control easement, which is the green area, and eventually a new levee will be built in here. This levee will tie into the city's levee and wrap around the project here. And then the railroad is here. The railroad, and this, as it turned out, this levee could not be connected to the railroad property, so a separate levee had to be built. In addition to the plat in your packet, there are a couple additional documents. There's a declaration of setback restrictive covenant. That relates to our MDZS and LDZS. Again, here's the river down here, and these are our minimum disturbance setback zones. These require a covenant to be in place, a deed covenant to prohibit development in this area. So that's one document that has been included in your packet for submitted for your approval. And there's also the developer's agreement, which goes along with these major plats. Additionally, there's a document from the developer granting the city a permanent easement for the flood control levee, as we saw. Planning staff has received several comments regarding this project. There is a letter that was included in your packet, and the case planner, Aaron Nelson, has had conversations in person and on the phone with a few other folks regarding this project, some asking questions and some in opposition, and some of them may be speaking tonight. The applicant, Jesse Craig, is with us tonight and may wish to address the commission. The Planning Commission's recommendation is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Don. So, Madam President, wishes to speak to this plat change and zoning change?
Hi. Fine. I'm Malcolm Butler. I have lived in the Oak Grove neighborhood for 38 years. I didn't know much about this until Friday. I mean, I know 2 years ago there was, this project was raised when the previously mentioned project that failed was brought up and discussed here. And there was concern about that in the neighborhood. There was also concern that this was sort of in the future, but I didn't know this till Friday because I'm not within 300 feet. So I wasn't informed of the meeting in June or the fact that there was a meeting here. My wife found it on Facebook. I've talked with a number of neighbors in the Oak Grove neighborhood and people in the Fargo Coalition of Neighborhoods who are concerned. And I think the concern is that even though you're only talking about a plat change, there wouldn't be a plat change if there wasn't a development, and we don't really know what this development is. We know what was talked about 2 years ago. There are a lot of questions that people have, and this is the first chance anybody's had to find out about it. So there may be other people who want to address this, but I think, you know, this is sort of the narrow end of the wedge for the kind of issue that is going to come up in the next agenda item, where you have developers and you have neighborhoods, and they need to speak with each other and they need to work together, and that hasn't happened. It doesn't seem to be happening in this case either. So I think that's maybe an introduction to other comments that other people may have.
Donald, do you want to comment to the process here, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioners, we understand that, as the testifier stated there, as Mr. Butler stated, that this is just the plat here. We understand that the applicant is going to propose some future development. I would refer those questions to Mr. Craig if he's available to talk about that.
The process is you're coming to us in for a plat development. The developer wouldn't necessarily have the plans as of yet. They would ask for a zoning change so they could do it. And so the public, the neighborhood wouldn't even know about it, except that he's asking for a plat change.
Right. There is
this time, it's not the expectation for the developer necessarily to have the building they're going to put up there.
Yes, so that's correct. No additional development has been proposed at this time. Again, Mr. Craig could probably tell you what he's got in mind for the future.
Jesse, you want to come up and talk about what you can possibly do there, please? I know you don't. But.
This is 2.5 years in the making, so you know, it's been quite a process. I mean, we started off with 2 lots, and it's expanded, and for the gentleman who just spoke, I've had 4 neighborhood meetings in regards to this. Sat down with the Neighborhood Coalition, had meetings with them, discussed that openly with them. Tracy Wadvane, Merrill Pipcorn, points of contact. There's another gentleman, I can't remember his name, has a Facebook account. So you're correct in the fact that these plans have changed multiple times. And, you know, I've seen in city commission meetings before where, you know, people put the cart before the horse, and that wasn't positively looked upon. So in this case, we really haven't gotten too deep into the project as far as plans and spending a bunch of money before we know what we can actually build on. Like Don said before, I challenge anyone to come forward with a more complex plan or site than this, really.
Yes.
Between the cul-de-sac, between the levee, between all of that, it's been quite a process and not an inexpensive one when it comes to, you know, working with KLJ for engineering. We got soil remediation, we did soil samples on it, we got 14 feet of fill on that we have to remove. The city-owned lot to the north is literally a holding pond, not by choice, but just by contours. That has to be filled, a gate valve removed. I mean, it's quite extensive. So to answer, you know, the neighborhood's concerns, there's going to be multiple conversations, meetings, open communication in regards to this project moving forward, because that was one of the things in discussing with them previously is having that buffer, you know, around the DMU zoning. So to reiterate what Don said, we're not looking for a zoning change now. I don't even foresee one in the future, to be honest with you. So right now, it's just a matter of, you know, giving up the land I have to complete that levee for flood protection in North Fargo, seeing what we can use if the alley's vacated. Then we have kind of our square footage on what we can try to put in there that accommodates everyone so that the neighborhood's comfortable with it and happy with it.
And you'd be coming before us when you finally get your plans.
Correct. Yeah, that's a whole nother process.
You go before the planning commission, the neighborhoods will all get to enter in, but you're actually asking to reach out to the neighbors.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank
Yep.
you. Is there anyone else present who wishes to speak in regards to this?
Hi, I'm Carol Pearson, and I'm speaking as a neighbor in the Oak Grove neighborhood. I have many concerns about the Craig development. I thank Jesse for, you know, interacting with the neighborhood. Previously, I was out of town, I think in June, when the only meeting I knew about occurred last June, and I was out of town, Craig's petition today has to do with plat changes, alley vacancy, and flood protection work. I am not conversant with policy regarding plat changes. My issues today have to do with the potential development as it has evolved in the last several years, all related to or under the auspices of Jesse Craig development entities. Members of our neighborhood have repeatedly expressed concerns about this development. Letters, petitions, and people speaking out at planning and commission meetings have all evidenced the strength of the feelings in the neighborhood. As the Horace Mann Neighborhood Association, and I think Roosevelt, I'm quoting and paraphrasing some of their very articulate statements that I think apply, has articulated, there are few other neighborhoods in Fargo-Moorhead that have such a tight-knit, small-town feel. Tree-lined streets, parks, and playgrounds, and wonderful gardens entice walkers and bikers of all ages. Sometimes in the summer, there's maybe 1 or 2 cars that go down North Terrace, and tons of bikers and walkers and hikers, and, you know. Accessible downtown local businesses, architectural details on fine historic homes, and friendly neighbors are all part of this strong neighborhood. We want dialogue with City of Fargo departments, nearby businesses and institutions, Fargo police and the media, in addition to dialogue with any developers considering building in our area. Our neighborhood residents enjoy the diversity, and I think this really applies to Oak Grove neighborhood, diversity of the population that calls this neighborhood home. Seniors and students, families with and without children, appreciation for all walks of life is the backbone to the vibrancy found here. Equally diverse are the homes, ranging from grand and historic to small and quaint, and that is Oak Grove. Most of the homes were built between 1890 and 1950. Many properties have benefited from thoughtful renovations and restorations. Lower-priced, fixer-upper homes with rich details and solid bones can also be found among some of the most reasonably priced single-family homes in Fargo-Moorhead. It's a really accessible neighborhood, I think. Our Oak Grove neighborhood has received the designation as a National Historical Neighborhood. Any future development should take this status into consideration. We want to strengthen our strong neighborhood as it is a unique treasure in Fargo-Moorhead. Several points, and the National Historic designation, I think, in part is important and unique to Oak Grove because as opposed to, say, 8th Street South, our neighborhood was the small arts and crafts bungalows and the mechanics row that, was accessible to middle class and lower middle class as opposed to 8th Street South. And so I think that's a unique type of historic designation. Several points specific to this plat change petition. Many of the homes included in this plat are amongst the most historic in Fargo, dating from the 1890s. And in my druthers, I think instead of being raised, renovations that would keep these homes visible and beautiful would be better contribute to the tenor of our neighborhood. The development also, number 2, is at the choke point of traffic circulation in our neighborhood. Once they took away North River Road, we only have 7th and 6th to get out on. And if that's, a big development that's a big choke point for any traffic in our neighborhood. This was sort of addressed, why does that PUD that was granted for a previous development that I saw, why does that stay in force? I was just a question. And if multi-story apartment buildings are raised on the ridge exactly adjacent to Wildflower Grove Park, on the west border of Wildflower Grove, I feel that our wonderful park, the beauty of that park, would be heavily affected by the presence of these apartments, because it's this nice bowl that goes down by the community gardens. It feels so open and wild and free, and I think visible high-rise, not high-rise, but multi-story apartment buildings right on that edge would, for me, seriously detract from the aesthetics of that park. Soil survey, I'm sure you'll do this, but, the soils in our neighborhood are, as we all know, very not stable, and so that's just, I had an office in Menard when it fell down, and so, soils matter. Yes. So I don't know if he's here tonight, but as neighbor, you have that letter from Paul Seminary, and as he stated in a previous letter to the Planning Commission, we understand and believe our concern is for our neighborhood. We believe in city growth, but we wanted to emphasize that the growth should follow the design of the neighborhood. And our concern is for our neighborhood and those that live here, and we want a project that enhances and strengthens our neighborhood. Thank you.
Is there anyone else, President, we should speak? I try to ask you to keep your remarks to less than 3 minutes, please. We've got a lot of people in here tonight, and I don't want it going too long, please.
Hi, Commission. Jordan Runsvold. I'm the treasurer for the Horseman Area Neighborhood Association. And I just wanted to say thank you for everybody that showed up. I mean, it's huge. Thank you for Jesse Craig. Thank you for your previous engagement with the neighborhood. He is correct. We did have several meetings. The last one was September 28th, 2017, so it has been a while. And we would just like to invite more meetings, more collaboration, and working together to get a project together that suits the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Did you want to speak? Don't be bashful. I know it's a big room of people.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I was kind of hiding over there, so I couldn't see if anyone else was coming up.
Okay.
But hi, I'm Shanna. I live on Oak Street. I can actually see my house right over there. My husband and I haven't been in our house for even 2 years yet. But I have already attended one of these meetings, and my husband has attended another one of these meetings. And I just wanted to echo the concerns of my neighbors. I haven't met a good chunk of you, but I fiercely love our neighborhood from the short time I've been there. And kind of what I think his name Jordan had just said, open to more meetings, because I haven't had any yet. So I would love that future collaboration.
And work with our planning department as well. We do. Had a motion. Who's the motion? Commissioner Grinberg, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Excuse me, Commissioner Strand.
If I might, tell me why we need to do this before the project's envisioned. If we're talking vacation of public property and all these various elements, I'm just curious, is this necessitated to be done now? Or would it be prudent to know what they're envisioning? To know then what the neighborhoods are wanting? Because I'm just curious if this is a practical path to go down until we all know more what we're talking about.
If the builder doesn't know what they can build, John, by the plating, then they have no need to go out with any developer and build up anything, because he spends money then to build something that he can't build anyway. He has to have the plat straightened out prior to him proceeding with any development. We have seen some developers bring it in completed. Jesse usually likes to see what he can build and how big he can build it on. It has to do with parking requirements, a variety of different things that he'll get into. So typically the pattern has been in planning. We get the plat cleared to what could build there, and then by those rules they can bring back a plan for us. Planning Commission still has to hear it. They have to approve it. We still have to approve it. So whatever Jesse wants to put on there, we still has to go through both planning and us before it could be built.
But it's not required, is it, that we do this plat at this early phase?
It's not required that it brings a plan.
That's where I'm at, is we've heard this before, and we've heard from the neighbors before. I remember back then not knowing if the proposal was for rentals or for ownership. I'm still not able to tell anybody this is what they see going there. And I'd rather know, I'm just one vote, but I'd rather know what's intended to go there before we decide that we're going to do this stage right now.
Eric Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Strand, one of the limitations you have in making your decision, similar to what the Planning Commission has in making their recommendation to you, is to make a decision based on the factors. So you are, to put it bluntly, you're sort of forced to deal with an application by any applicant and focus your decision-making on whether or not they meet the factors. And, you know, there might be occasions when it's warranted for some reason or another to link the actual development or a future zoning change to a plat. But aside from that, I mean, I think what you'd need to do is to look at the factors as analyzed by Donald Kress here and determine whether you sort of agree with his findings or if there's something about it that you would take issue with.
But how about the question John has is, would you know what's going there? I mean, people come to us all the time with plat changes. We don't always know what's going to go in that plat.
Right. We don't always know. Yeah. Very, very commonly they come together, but both the zoning and the platting, but they're not required to.
You know, in our next topic too, we have another example of bringing neighbors and developers together to find hopefully common ground. That would be my preference here too, would be to see if we can come up with a vision the neighborhood embraces and welcomes, and that the developer goes, I can work with that, and so that proactively you're all. But that's just my personal bent. That I would rather see us have more of these communications proactively up front, so we know more what's being proposed, and then that's the information we're getting.
Well, but you have the developer said he will work with the neighborhood, and the neighborhood says I'll work with him, so you do have that. They're going to work together to try to come up with a compromise.
And I'm just one vote.
I understand that. I'm not debating it. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Garrick?
Yes.
Strand?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. How many here are for the St. Paul's Newman Center addition? Could you please raise your hands? Okay. In light of the fact that I want to stay here till midnight, I would ask that if you're going to add something to the discussion, think about it. We do have neighborhood representatives that are going to represent you well. If there's something you think they missed, then please put forth that. It already has been heard in planning, so the commission really's position at this point is to maybe listen some for and some against, but we're not going to listen all night, so I just want to forewarn you about that. If you have something pertinent to the discussion of why you dislike the plan or like the plan, you're welcome to speak. We usually will have a certain amount that speak against the project, since there seems to be some against the project in the neighborhood, and then we'd have people speaking for the project, and then I'll cut off public discussion. Commission, the Planning Commission has, or excuse me, Planning staff and Commission has made a recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Which
And
Donald will go over now, but just bear that in mind if you're thinking of speaking tonight. I'll cut it off after a while if it gets too long. And for those speaking, please keep it to pertinent facts. If there's some things that you want made present, all the commissioners have read about this, and thank God all of you have sent us emails and letters, and we are getting communications. I think every one of the commissioners has talked quite a bit about this project. So Donald, I'll let you go, and then I would ask those who want to speak against to line up on the right side here behind him so we can bring you up in a timely fashion.
Mr. Chairman, just before Donald speaks, I do intend, after all public comment and our discussion, to make a motion to continue this till February 11th. So I just wanted that up front, that there'll be more time if the motion passes based on tonight, and I'll have some comments at the end as well.
Okay, Donald, you are on.
Yes, sir, thank you. Just to follow up on your comments there, Mayor Mahoney, for those of you who have not seen the staff report, all the comments that staff has received since this project started back in July are included in the Commission's staff report, and summaries of the comments made at the Planning Commission meetings are also included. So it's a 98-page report by the time you're done with all the comment. So, Commissioners, we have a few preparatory things before we start the actual presentation. Note that a laydown item was provided to you this evening. This was just an additional letter we received since the time the packet went out on Thursday, February 10th. Commissioners, and also in this case we have an additional consideration, and that is a valid protest petition from the surrounding property owners. Just to recap here, the St. Paul's Newman Center project includes a zone change, a PUD overlay, a PUD master plan development, and a minor plat. The protest is against the zone change. This protest petition process is provided for in our land development code. A valid protest petition requires that if your commission moves to approve, a supermajority vote, that is 4 of the 5 commissioners, is required to approve the motion instead of the usual simple majority of 3 of the 5 commissioners. A more detailed explanation of the protest process, as well as a spreadsheet and map identifying the protesting properties, are included in your staff report. In addition to staff's presentation, the developer, Larry Nygaard of Roars, wishes to address the commission, and representatives of the Roosevelt neighborhood who are also here, that would be Mr. Thompson, Mr. Enochson, and Mr. Lashkowitz, also wish to address the commission in addition to any other public comment. As the mayor has indicated here, this project has been in the review and hearing process for several months with the city, and that process has included significant participation from the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association, others in the Roosevelt neighborhood, and the developer. What we have here before you is a timeline of those meetings. These meetings are all summarized in your staff report. This chart isn't in it, but just to get an idea, this was submitted July 16th, 2018, and then there was, at the time scheduled for the September 4th Planning Commission hearing, there was an open house here prior to that meeting. There were some residents attended that. The hearing, original Planning Commission hearing, was held on September 4th after testimony was taken and presentations were made. That was continued 2 more meetings here, actually, and was heard again in December 4th, which is the most recent meeting, and that is the meeting from which the recommendation is before you tonight comes. But as you see, there were numerous meetings facilitated by planning staff with the developer, the neighborhood, the diocese, and all of them together, and a change in the original project design that was presented at the September 4th meeting was modified to the design that you see today. When the developer presents, he has a brief timeline of the meetings that he engaged in before the project was submitted to the city. They've been working on this since, I believe, late 2015, so he'll summarize that. So now go forward with the regular presentation here. Again, this is the St. Paul Newman Center project. The 3.82 acre project site is located in the 1100 block of University Drive and 12th Street North. It covers the entire block. Existing land uses are St. Paul's Newman Center. There's some multifamily housing here and some single-family housing as well. The zonings are LC, limited commercial, MR3, multi-dwelling residential, and SR3, single-family or single-dwelling residential. The zone change proposes to rezone the entire block to MR3 with a planned unit development overlay zone. The PUD overlay proposes to modify certain development standards of the MR3 project, of the MR3 zone. There's a chart included in your packet that enumerates these. I won't go over those unless you wish me to do so toward the end here. The plat proposes to replat the current 23 lots into 3 lots, one of which will be owned by the Fargo Diocese, as we understand it, and 2 by the developer. So there's a lot of lines on this plat here, but we'll see. This is Lot 1, which will be where the Newman Center and its administration building and related facilities are, like most large churches have these additional parts of the building beyond the sanctuary. There's also some housing here that's part of the diocese. This Lot 2 will be where the market rate housing is, and Lot 3 will be some townhomes, some individual, apparently designed to be sold as condos, as we understand it, individual dwellings here, and we'll see that in more detail in a minute. So this is the PUD Master Plan, a graphic representation of what we just talked about here. Here again is the chapel, the Newman Center Administration Building and Parish Hall. And this is University Drive down here, 12th Avenue here. Faith-based housing, there's 25 units there in 5 stories. So that's Lot 1. There's that Lot 1 lot line right there. Lot 2 is the market rate housing. That's 87 units. 5 stories here, stepping down to 4 units on the 11th Avenue side, being conscious of the relationship to the single-family housing here. And then Lot 3 back here is where these townhomes are. These face 12th Street North, and you take their access in here. Have some more renderings. These renderings are provided by the applicant, so here you're looking at project rendering facing southeast. Again, here's the chapel, the parish hall, and the housing, and then the market rate housing back here, and the townhomes here, parking in the back here. And then the developers provided the alternate view facing southwest, looking at it from the back here. Again, the townhomes. You see here how the market rate housing steps down, and then the church and its parish hall and associated facilities. This is a rendering of the townhomes. Here is the corner of 11th Avenue and 12th Street, so you're facing northwest. Here's what those townhomes might look like. This is not 2 separate sets of townhomes. This is the front and this is the back. This is where the garages are. So just some renderings of that. And here's some real-life examples of what townhomes like that look like. I don't know that these are in Fargo, but Mr. Nygaard can talk about the history of that as well. There's, of course, a lot of residents and a lot of activity here, so there's considerable parking that needs to happen here. As you see on Lot 3, this one meets our ordinance meeting a requirement of 2 spaces for a single-family residential unit, so that parking is entirely self-contained here. Here for the market rate housing and the faith-based housing, there is surface parking here as well as underground parking. And this is at a different rate than we normally have, but it's calculated in a different way. Again, there's a detailed chart in your packet, but we'll just say here that they're basing it on the number of parking spaces per bed as opposed to per unit, and considering that this is a student-oriented thing, similar to other ones we've done recently here, other large projects, that basing it on the per bed, maybe a little more realistic as to the number of people who are actually living there. And then there's also parking for the chapel itself. This is about approximately a 500-seat chapel, so that would require 200 parking spaces. This is, the developer proposes to accommodate this entirely off-site. He has agreements with NDSU and I believe Mr. Sabo, who owns numerous properties around here, most recognized perhaps as the Bison Turf. And he has negotiated agreements that the parking will be accommodated off-site for that, so that's also part of the planned unit development. And again, there's a detailed breakdown of the parking in your staff report. I'll stop here a second. Planning staff, as the mayor has noted, has received considerable public comment on this project since it was submitted in July of 2018. Most of this comment has opposed the project. These comments are summarized in your staff report, and comments, letters, and emails and summaries of the phone conversations are included in your packet. As noted earlier, the developer and the Roosevelt neighborhood representatives have presentations for the commission. Your packet includes a zone change and PUD ordinance prepared by the city attorney's office. And again, the applicant Larry Nygaard and Roosevelt neighborhood representatives Harold Thompson, Kenny Knoxon, and Jim Leshkowitz are with us tonight. They wish to address the commission. Commissioner Grinberg, as you have stated your motion to continue, I'm not going to go forward with this motion at this time.
We'll do that after the public hearing, Don.
Yes, sir, thank you. And so that concludes our presentation. For the presenters, I do have some extra slides. All the graphics in the packet are included in the slideshow, so if you need to refer to any of those, we can just go forward to those as necessary. Thank you, sir.
We may call you back too, Donald. Thank you.
I'll stand right here.
Ken, you up? I was going to go against first. I think there are more people against than for, maybe. I don't know.
Yep. Okay. All right. Okay, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about this issue. I think was already mentioned by Don is that if you're looking at the packet, you'll see overwhelmingly the number of people responding and giving input has been negative towards the ROARS portion of this, at least in its current iteration. And I do want to stress something that we've been stressing all along is that we have no issue with the Newman Center itself and its plans. We support it. We welcome it. What we're having issues with is the high-density, multi-residential portion that ROARS would own. Also, as you know, we do have a request or successfully submitted a petition, and as we were circulating that petition around to the neighbors who would be impacted and would be able to sign, homeowners themselves were nearly 100% against this iteration at this time. And there's reason for that. We had assumed that the LDC and the Roosevelt Plan and the University Mixed Use Zone were in place to protect our community from encroachment of high-density housing projects. The fact that the proposal is made at this point tells us we were wrong in these assumptions, and so that's why we're here. 10 years ago, the Fargo City Planning came to the Fargo residents, or excuse me, Roosevelt residents, with a proposal to designate a third of our neighborhood, and I don't know that you can see a little bit of, no, you probably can't. It would be off to your left, basically the boot of the neighborhood to the west, southwest of the campus. Basically, was proposed to us that since that was already fairly rental in component, that it would benefit us to allow that certain designations of the UMU to be placed on that section in that area. And it was essentially the rationale was that it would take the pressure off the rest of the neighborhood for these high density kind of developments that we've been concerned about. Among other things, the UMU loosened height restrictions and setback requirements, so trying to give a break to the developers, but also applying some design standards that would contribute to a better look and to the development. Our main objection to the ROARS portion of the Newman Center proposal has been that it belongs in the UMU district. The PUD overlay they're asking for provides them with all of the benefits of a UMU project, but with none of the UMU standards. We feel it is a complete disregard of the spirit of both the UMU district ordinance, the land development code, and the neighborhood plan. The UMU ordinance states the following: a zoning map amendment to a UMU district may not be applied to the easterly portion of the Roosevelt neighborhood until an amendment of the Roosevelt neighborhood plan has been approved by the Fargo Board of City Commissioners. Such a change to the plan has not been discussed or approved by this body, but we are looking at a hybrid UMU project, essentially. More importantly, moving forward with this project in its current form sends a message to other developers waiting in the wings. And I just want to point out, we have the NDSU Foundation owning a significant portion of the properties along University. We have a number of investors who have started purchasing up land in this area between where the UMU district starts and University, and we know that they're waiting to see what's happening here. So, that creates an issue, because at some point, depending on what happens with this decision, we'll signal something to these developers and these investors. Once you set the precedent, the developers can erect high-density complexes in the middle of the residential neighborhoods, PUD or overlay or not. The expectation from other developers will be that they receive the same treatment from the city, thus rendering useless a land use plan and nullifies the whole rationale for the UMU district anyway. And it raises serious questions for other neighborhoods looking to create their own land use plans, which we've been talking about over several years, that we need to get more of those in place. So the residents are left with some questions. Where are the lines going to be drawn? Will they be maintained, these lines? What will be the guiding principles for future development? What is the city's vision for the Roosevelt neighborhood and other core neighborhoods? And what voice will residents have in determining that vision? Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Jim Laskowicz. I live in the Roosevelt neighborhood where I've resided for 33 years and member of the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association. But why I'm here tonight is to tell you I'm opposed to the project because of the market rate component. And I think Ken said it best that, we do support the Newman Center and their needs to expand their mission. And I just want to reiterate that because I think that's an important point. And I'm sure that you know that we're opposed to the height, the density, and the parking concerns and what this will do to our neighborhood. You'll hear that tonight. I'll let others speak to that. And I'm hopeful that out of this that we can find a compromise that is acceptable to all of us. But my intent tonight is to bring forward what we think that the future vision should look like going forward for our neighborhood. A little bit of background, and this is not a criticism of our planning department, it's more on the process. As our experience has evolved through the process of planning and development, we feel like we have a lack of input into the development process. We're often told that there are problems with the land development code, but currently it's really all we have to protect each other from land development. And neighbors have to repeatedly come before not only this body, but the Planning Commission in the interest of the neighborhood. And we're always happy to do that, but we do find that it doesn't always serve our best interest. The other item that I want to talk about briefly is just this cycle of disinvestment that I think has to be stated again, and that is what's going on in our neighborhood as well as other core neighborhoods in our city. Step one is that single-family homes are being acquired and converted into rental, and we know that happens, and that's just the way it is. The next thing that happens is that the developer tends to overpay over the market value for the properties in order to acquire them. So oftentimes paying two times or more of the market rate. What that does is it eliminates potential buyers that would have owned, lived in, and improved this property. It also takes away from the ever-shrinking workforce and affordable housing in our community. The developer then lets the property sit vacant and often boarded up, or rents the property out to problem tenants. The property then stagnates, worsens as the developer acquires adjacent parcels over the years. Now the project has to cash flow since the developer's increased cost on the front end during this acquisition phase, and it's unlikely to pencil out for them financially unless there's some other factors that makes this project cash flow. So then the developer will claim that the neighborhood is blighted and will seek tax relief from you through a TIF to make the project work financially and actually counts on it in their business model for developing this property. So what is it that our neighborhood really envisions for how to move forward in a positive manner? In the spring, with your permission, we intend to come back to the city to begin work on updating our neighborhood plan and the land use map, which I think Ken was alluding to, our future vision, and deal with some of our major concerns, such as blight, property maintenance, rental certification, and parking. And we'd like to help lead
design sessions on some of the major thoroughfares that go through our neighborhood, such as University Drive. And we want to be clear that we are not against the developer trying to put a project together in his or her best interest. We need and want good developers to reinvest in our neighborhood. What we seek, though, is collaboration with developers and that really follows our neighborhood plans, reflects the architecture and the history of our neighborhood. We have a vision for an investment cycle that would put forth, or it's being put forth by groups like Rebuilding Together, and I know you guys have heard some of that. They intend to, in the near future, invest over $1.3 million in 10 or more homes in Roosevelt neighborhood, and the infill of up to 4 new properties or new homes in our neighborhood. We've been working with them to try to get this accomplished. Other partners are out there, including the City of Fargo, Habitat for Humanity, and several banks like Gate City and Wells Fargo. The rehab of single-family homes is really paramount to our success as a neighborhood. The concept of a new community land trust would allow for the purchase and the renovation of homes and or rental properties, or new residential homes that would go into our neighborhood, which will help us anchor our neighborhood and provide stability. And this has had a tough time getting off the ground, but we really think that will make a difference to us in the future. It holds really great promise for us because it means that we can take properties that have once been single family, then been converted over to rental, be converted back into single family. We're also seeing extremely high vacancy rates in rental housing in our neighborhood. By some estimates, it's said to be above 20%. In the absence of any plan to deal with high vacancy homes or high vacancy areas, homes will simply be even more run down and blighted and potential targets for a developer to amass property with the intention of tearing them down to put up these large developments. So what we'd like to see is a new established and improved NRI or neighborhood revitalization program or a renaissance program or whatever you guys want to call it to provide investment opportunities to homeowners, nonprofits that provide rehab services like Rebuilding Together, and investors alike that allow them to put money back into our housing and help provide a safe, affordable, and attractive place to live. We as neighbors need some teeth to this idea of code enforcement, and thank you for adding, I think, 1 code enforcer for this next year, but we need more than that. And so properties that are out there that are allowing to blight would not be allowed to blight.
I'm going to ask you, you're over your time.
Okay.
Can you just
I have
finish
one more
with
paragraph.
one more paragraph?
Finally, we need an updated city process that is friendlier to our neighborhood concerns. If our land development code is outdated, then we have a vision for getting it updated to one that works. Lines need to be drawn more clearly to provide stability and protect investments in our single-family homes, and we would encourage that and want to be involved in that process. Let us help with updating our neighborhood plan and our land use plan, and let us work together to solve some of the problems you tend to hear over and over again in this meeting. And let us sit at the table and come up with some concrete action plans. Thank you.
Thank you. For further testifiers, please confine it to the project. Tell us what you don't like about the project. Try to keep it to 3 minutes. Your first 2 have done a great job of pointing out what they like or don't like, but let's keep it to just pertinent facts. We've heard a lot on Planning Commission already, so I would ask Harold, that's how we do this, okay? Thank you.
No, full print. We'll get it done in 3 minutes. Mr. Mayor and fellow commissioners, this is an honor and a privilege. Thank you for this opportunity to express our objection. My name is Harold Thompson. I live at 1309 North 9th Street. My wife and I have lived in the Roosevelt neighborhood for over 40 years, and since my retirement from a career in architecture, it's been my pleasure to share some of my technical expertise with the RNA, and I want to touch on a couple of those technical items. You've received over the last 4 months a mound of data regarding our objections. It's in your packet. In a nutshell, we just think the proposal is too dense, it's too tall, and doesn't have enough parking. But the matter in front of us tonight is the applicant's request for a change of zoning. They want an MR3 with a PUD overlay. Please know we object to both. We object to the PUD because one, it expands the limit of density from 24 to 33 units per acre, and that density in our neighborhood is UMU, as explained by the previous speakers. It's a district you provided for us 10 years ago with this very purpose, that the market rate housing in this application belongs in the UMU district. We also object that with the PUD because it would render our district standards obsolete. The requirements of the UMU are more stringent than what are required of the MR3. Any future applicant could simply use the MR3 with this PUD wrap that's being proposed tonight and circumvent our UMU district requirements. That would be an egregious misuse of our land development code, as far as I'm concerned. The developer in the other part of the PUD is that, if you haven't noticed, is that they have taken two projects that need the entire site to comply with MR3, or MR1 if it's just the church. But because they've taken two projects and tried to stuff them into one, they need a PUD to meet all the design, they've had to exceed all the design requirements. And under the design requirements for MR3, there are 11 items. And they've exceeded 9 of them, including density, building coverage, setbacks, open space, buffers. I mean, just go on and on and on the list. And we oppose the use of that because the density that remains is the density that remains on only half the site. So when they're asking for 33 units an acre, it's only being built on the south half of the site, and therefore the effective density is 66 units. And that, to me, is a question you have to ask yourself, because you've been through this process 100,000 times, a request for a zoning change. And from my perspective, when it comes to a zoning change, especially when we're asking to eliminate single family, we're changing the dynamics of not only the lot, but you're changing the dynamics of all the lots around it. And beyond that, in our neighborhood. That's why they're here tonight, because the dynamics are changing so dramatically. I think they're more than what the neighbors should have to provide. And that leads us to the MR3 district that they're asking for. We are opposed to that because it too expands the density beyond the limits that this block should have to absorb. Our original request was to have this block rezoned to an MR1. That's 16 units to the acre. That's exactly what it lives with right now. That would accommodate the chapel and up to 61 units of faith-based housing. Its implied density, because it's only being built on the south half, would be 32 units to the acre. That's how it's going to live, and that's the impact it's going to have on our neighborhood. So the MR1 is a density we think is acceptable for this block, and we hope you agree. Now, since Commissioner Grinberg has offered an opportunity to vote as a continuance, we want you to know that we I should read my notes, that we concur and that we would support a vote for continuance with the understanding that one of the commissioners, if not more, would help lead a meeting and get these issues on the table between us and the developer.
Thank you, Harold.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi.
Hi.
Is that better? I'm Judy Thompson of 1309 North 9th Street. And I'm assuming that everyone has heard the name Samuel Trout. And then what I'd like to do is add something to this project. I would like to present an idea for a memorial for Samuel Trout. It would be based on the Bible verse from Matthew 10. Quote, "And if you give even a cup of cold water to one of the least of my followers, you will surely be rewarded," unquote. Like the waters of baptism signify a new start to life, we hope for a new start of life to this corner of our city. We remember Samuel Trout, who, being God's humble servant, offered water to a stranger, and it was his last act of kindness on this earth. We have been left wondering and wandering at his passing, but I will hold on to the faith in God that he had. I know his reward is great in heaven, but I'd like us to remember him on this earth too. The memorial could be as big as a sprinkle park or as small as a water fountain, but I think a memorial of water seems like a fitting tribute.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ken Lepper, 1021 8th Avenue North. I feel a lot of trepidation following that very gentle conversation because I'm a very confrontational person typically.
Let's hope it cools you down a bit.
Yeah. I'm going to try to keep myself on task here. 2 points. I think I want to point out that I am a resident of the Roosevelt neighborhood, but I am not a paying member of the RNA. That organization believes very firmly in cooperation, and I do not. I think I want to try to be the voice of numerous residents of the neighborhood who are just frustrated, if not angry, that this project is even being proposed. It's inconceivable, the scale of the project that they've proposed in our neighborhood. We invested, many of us invested in that neighborhood as a predominantly single-family dwelling. Some of them are rentals, but predominantly single-family dwellings throughout the neighborhood. People over the years have told me, well, you can just move if you don't like the development. That is untrue, because there are no other neighborhoods in Fargo that have vintage housing, well-developed tree stocks, and in the price point of our neighborhood. So we can't just move if we like that kind of living condition. So I have come to discuss the rezoning and replatting. Numerous projects have occurred in our neighborhood over the past decade and a half. Each time I call planning, they say, well, there's nothing we can do because they're following the zoning laws. Well, tonight, or as this project continues, the current zoning that would not permit this scale, this massive scale of development. So many times over the past decade and a half, zoning has been used to undermine our neighborhood. Tonight, I'm asking that you maintain the zoning, which will actually be a benefit to our neighborhood. It's been used against us for so long. Use it to benefit us now. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have 2 more speakers, then we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have the proponents that are for it.
Hello, I'm Michael. I live a few blocks away from this particular project. I'm a professional engineer, and we make a lot of observations. And what I want to talk about a little bit is the impact of density. That prior to this year, when those houses that the developers have bought up, that are vacated right now, some are even boarded up, but prior to that, the foot traffic past my house, I would see on any given night groups of kids, 20 to 50, marching down the streets, back and forth. This year, all of those houses that have boarded up, there has been 0 foot traffic. This is directly related to density. Now, when all those kids were marching back and forth, I had to put up security lights on my property to keep them from peeing in my backyard. You know, it's just the way it is. Now, this year it's been really nice because none of that foot traffic's there. There's no cars. The parking on my street, they're not parking in my driveway, which I think is remarkably nice. Again, all related back to the amount of density. And if this is just single-family homes that are being rented, creating that much foot traffic and car traffic, what is the density, the problems of the foot traffic from the proposed project? I want you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean. I live in the Roosevelt neighborhood, and I'd like to oppose the large apartment complex, you're putting more people and more vehicles and more traffic and more problems on top of problems. And we prefer single-family homes or the townhomes. They're doing a really nice job with the church. It looks really nice in the projects, but maybe they could pull some money from legislation and put a parking ramp over there where they closed down that Starbucks. Kind of that's what had been in the project anyway, to put the large developments over there. And then just keep our neighborhood the more single-family homes. We would really appreciate that. Maybe do a contingency and see if they can develop with our neighborhood, either the townhomes or the single-family homes. My friend from childhood, growing up, the Smith House, it says God Bless America on it, has a swimming pool in the backyard. They don't really want to see their house torn down, you know? And what Judith Thompson did, a memorial for Samuel Trout, our neighborhood has been a problem, and we've had to absorb a lot of, you know, the unplanning of the marketing for the influx of people that are coming in, and we really just don't want more high apartments, more parking. There's already those issues. And then maybe when they're removing all the asbestos, have the Department of Health and the EPA come in, and then also evaluate. They want to put and hold barrels of water underneath the church parking lot. Well, you get plumes when you hold things in there, and that can be contamination, just like the smokestacks at NDSU that puts off mercury into the air. So maybe have the EPA do the studies of health statistics and put that together, but please do a contingency, because we do not want the apartments, single-family homes or townhomes, and we don't want to keep looking at more parking lots or noise pollution.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Take a 5-minute break, come back and listen to the floor.
Sit right there with the white coat.
We'll call the meeting back to order. I would just remind you that all the commissioners are available. We're going to have a continuance of this, so all the commissioners are available. Those who didn't get to speak, just pick out any commissioner, give them a call, email them, or send them a letter. They'd be happy to talk to you. It's part of their job to continue to get information on it. I think the neighborhood representative did a nice presentation, and we've also read all the stuff in the packet. Now we're going to have people who are speaking for the project. The same rules apply. Larry, we may give you a little more allowances just to do the first presentation, but would hold most people to 3 minutes if we could.
Sure. I will work hard not to repeat myself. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Larry Nygaard from Roars Development. I'm here with Earl Wilhelm and Father Cheney from the diocese, along with some of the staff from Roars who helped with this development plan. Been a lot of talk tonight about the neighborhood and their input into the process, and I wanted to start out our presentation with a little history for the Commission of the time leading up to our first submittal the summer of 2018. We started this project envisioning it back in the fall of 2014 when the Newman Center first came to us about the possible vision for this block. And it is a very unique block, and I know one of the discussions tonight is that we don't want to paint the whole city with what comes out of the development efforts of this block, but this is a unique block with its proximity to NDSU, with the St. Paul Newman Center already there, but currently underserving the NDSU population. The possible collaboration with NDSU with classrooms, the intent of the St. Paul Newman Center to have faith-based housing, to work in conjunction with their other offerings. All of those things bundled together really, we felt, created a unique opportunity. So we spent a lot of time internally thinking about what that might be, touring other facilities like this across the country, and just hoping to come up with an ideal plan for this location. That culminated with a meeting in October of 2016 when we met with city staff and we started sort of envisioning and sharing with them what we thought might happen or what our objectives were. That later resulted in a meeting of November 2016, November 2nd, when we met with the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association and shared with them some of our first thoughts and tried to get some preliminary direction from them about how a development like this might proceed. We came up with a design that we shared with them right after the first of the year in 2017. We'll go over that just briefly. That was revised then in July of 2018, which was when we first came before the Planning Commission with a plan that we thought met as many of the neighborhood needs as possible. There was a lot of public outcry and input that came out of that Planning Commission meeting, enough so that we took a pause and we regrouped. We met with the neighborhood some more. We got the planning staff involved intimately. Up to that point, they'd certainly consulted us, but at that point, they took a real hands-on approach to helping us come up with a plan that we felt fit the unique circumstances of this block and how we might make the best possible development there. That resulted in I would say, almost a complete rework of our plan. I'll share some of those changes with you shortly. And ultimately produced the plan that we put before you tonight. That was reviewed with Planning Commission in December, approved, and that's what we're talking about tonight. So the idea that we didn't have any input from the city, the neighborhood, or city staff is just categorically not true. They have been intimately involved in the process along the way. Obviously, not everybody's needs can be met, so we have to decide what we think are the most important items. And that's what we have before you tonight, is kind of a collection of those really important items. So maybe we can just go through, for your sake, and I'm not going to waste a lot of time with this, but this was our initial concept back in the early part of 2017. You can see that encompasses a significant portion of the block with housing. At that point, we had 24 faith-based apartments and 138 apartment units. The neighborhood thought that was too dense. This is a rendering of it. You can see how we wrapped around with the development. Just for your reference, again, this is the Newman Center and the chapel. This is the faith-based housing portion, and this back portion was the initial market rate housing. Another view from the east. Donald, I know am I going the wrong way here? Yeah. Don and I practiced this. We should have it right. Okay, there, let's go back. Okay, so, yeah, no, not that one. Apologize for this. That's it. Oh, all right, I'm not going to be able to get it. Anyway, there was a submittal in July that we produced, and that had 29 faith-based apartments and 107 apartment units. So we had scaled back our objectives at that meeting. But again, we went through kind of a wholesale change after that Planning Commission meeting. Both the diocese and ourselves looked at the whole objective and what we were hoping to accomplish. There are a lot of nuances with the diocese. They scaled back their chapel and some of their other areas. They also scaled back their wish for faith-based apartments. We scaled back our market rate apartments to 87 units, and we introduced the idea of townhomes on the corner of 11th Avenue and 12th Street. One of the discussions that was frequently heard in our meetings was that we were eliminating single-family housing and building it or replacing it with apartments. Now, the reality is the block that you see there had about 3 homes, as far as we can tell, that were owned, owner-occupied. No kids in any of the homes that we bought. So we're not, in our mind, displacing a lot of single-family housing that was used by families. There were some single-occupied homes, some owner-occupied homes, but primarily those properties had been purchased by other speculators, owners, rental people that had just had enough and sold them to us. So a little bit of history about that project and how we got there. So today, we heard all kinds of numbers, and I don't want to debate those. We don't have the time to do that. But I can tell you that the staff, the planning staff has paid a lot of attention to this project. They've been important assistance to us to help us understand how we can best maximize the development on this, meeting as many objectives of the neighborhood and the development as we can. That's what's before you tonight. And so we'd ask that you review that and support it. We recognize that there's been a request for continuance, and we're willing to keep talking with the neighborhood. But frankly, all the discussion that we've heard tonight is not new, right? It's things that we've heard through many of these public meetings up to this point, both at the Planning Commission and our independent meetings. So I haven't heard anything new. And so there are new objectives to talk about, and this was a result of all of that input up to this point. So I will leave it at that and leave myself open to any questions that you might have.
Any questions, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a couple of quick ones? So one, Larry, you know, it's along University Drive, it's all the way. It's a run. Is there a reason why there isn't an opening in between? Do you have to have it that way?
Yes, that is part of the cooperation between St. Paul Newman Center and the faith-based apartments. Those are all connected with underground parking, with walkways, and shared amenities that are in different parts of the building. So the connectivity between those buildings is very important.
Okay, and I just want to add one more comment. So I met with the neighborhood representatives, and I think the townhomes, that's been universally a positive thing. So thank you very much. I think that went well. I think that helps provide a buffer to the neighborhood. And so from my perspective anyway, I think that was a very good thing. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I think we heard from Ken earlier today, he's trying to look for a compromise somewhere here, so we're under the impression that the neighbors are talking to you, trying to come to us.
Yes, yes, we are. And we met with them as recently as this afternoon. And so, yeah, we're still trying to find common ground, just trying to share the objectives that each one of us have. And I welcome the opportunity to do that. I want to thank everybody who's participated up to this point to get that, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay. Next speaker.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Dr. Dean Bershani, the president of NDSU. Not here to speak regarding the specific project in front of you, but to provide some context for the university's perspective that I hope will be helpful for everyone involved, both the current residents and the proposed development. Roughly 5 or 6 years ago, I don't want you to write that number down, but when we first started the university, realizing that we inevitably are going to grow, we started working with what it was at the time the Roosevelt neighborhood leadership, explaining that we were going to need to develop some properties that we owned along University Drive. They were understandably concerned, what, is this happening tomorrow? No, not for years yet. But we know that we're going to see a steady enrollment increase, and we want you to be a participant in how we develop university in a respectful manner to the single-family dwellings that would be behind it, and making sure that we scale the buildings so that those are a good fit. My point there being that, first off, we plan years and years in advance for enrollment growth at NDSU, and we have tried to do it in cooperation and collaboration with our neighbors. At the same time we were developing the property on University, we were also developing property with actually even more housing capacity on campus. So we've got skin in the game on both sides of the coin. I appreciate that there's been some conjecture that, oh, the enrollment growth isn't happening. Well, actually it is happening. We took a one-year blip. Admissions for the following year are already matching, if not exceeding, the ones from our record previous year. With the growth of the Fargo-Moorhead area, with NDSU becoming the largest university in the state in terms of full-time student enrollments, our national visibility increasing, it is inevitable that NDSU will continue to grow. That's a good thing for our city, our region, our state. And again, as the largest institution in terms of full-time student enrollment, we're getting students through and out into the workforce in a more efficient manner than any of our sister institutions. So NDSU's growth is very important to the economy of our city, region, and state. Along those lines, we have to also appreciate that most of our students are in STEM-related fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. They're very focused academically. They want to live as close to campus as possible. So although there is housing stock throughout the Fargo-Moorhead area, our students' first choice is to live on campus. Their second choice is to live proximal. And as they move up in the class ranks, understandably, they want the freedom and independence that goes with off-campus living. But again, they want to be close. They want to be efficient with their time and transportation. So the marketplace, I would anticipate, will continue to press for student housing as proximal to campus as possible. And again, I'm not speaking to this specific project, just in a broader context of our students. I also, as a president, have to recognize that some of the most horrific experiences our city has had in the last few years have happened on the north side of the campus. I'm not saying particularly the neighborhoods and the neighbors that are involved with the conversation tonight, but that's already been referenced in one part. Just a few blocks away in another place, we lost a student. So safety on the perimeter of campus, where I know our students want to live, and sometimes will live in conditions that I wish they weren't living in, obviously is a concern to me. And again, I'm not talking about this specific project, but in the broader context of that we will continue to grow as we have, with 1 year exception last year. Our students are very focused academically, and they're going to want to live proximally to campus. My encouragement to you is this is a big decision. I don't need to tell you that, and I would encourage you to take as much time with it as needed. And I say that both for the current residents of the area, but also what potentially might be the future residents, the growth of NDSU, and the success of our city, our region, and the state. Thank you very much for letting me offer a few thoughts. Happy to take any questions.
Well, and the other thing is you have about a 78% retention of the students in the community, so it's very important to us that NDSU continues to thrive.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Any
And
questions,
actually,
Commissioner?
that's a conservative number.
No, I have a boatload of questions, but I'll wait.
In talking to the neighborhoods today, it would be nice every now and then maybe if NDSU could talk at the neighborhood meeting just to kind of go over your growth and what's been going on, because one of their questions was in the next 5-10 years, how much growth is being anticipated, and then that impacts on Roosevelt, so they'd like to know.
Absolutely, and always happy to do that. Time flies when you're having fun, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I realized the last time we talked with Roosevelt neighborhood leadership was years ago, not with any ill intention, just we got caught up in the University Avenue part and forgotten that ultimately we will be continuing to grow our enrollment. So
You've just gotten the 7th-time national championship. I think you have some time now.
okay, things have freed up dramatically. Till next football season.
Thank you. Would just advise leaders just to catch his office sometime and get that done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Next, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Ashley Stoppleworth, and I'm a current senior at NDSU, and I just really want to thank you for this opportunity to speak in favor of the proposed project and, really give voice to the students who are a group that I feel that we haven't heard a lot from tonight. So, as I look forward to my upcoming graduation this spring, I've also taken the time to look back at my past 4 years here at NDSU and really reflect on it. And looking back, as a freshman, I came into college extremely nervous, very excited, but at the same time, also looking forward to the next 4 years and the growth that I knew that was bound to happen, and also looking forward to pursuing a line of study that I was passionate about while also building authentic and true friendships. I realized that I couldn't do college on my own, and I knew that I wanted to find that group of friends to venture with me. Looking back at that 4-year journey and those goals that I had coming in freshman year, I can say that all of it would have looked incredibly different for me and many of my peers without our involvement at St. Paul's Newman Center. As a freshman, I found my home away from home at the Newman Center and started to meet other individuals who were striving to grow both academically and personally, and challenged me to do the same. These were individuals who pushed me to not only be a better student, but to be a better leader and member of the community. They're also the people that today I consider to be those true and authentic friends that I was searching for coming into college. And although my own story is unique, this incredible impact that the Newman Center is having on me and countless other students is not. NDSU has extremely high retention rates, as was already mentioned, and many of those graduates are staying in North Dakota, benefiting our economy and communities. However, I believe that the graduates who will truly be the movers and shakers of tomorrow are the ones who are pursuing excellence in their academics as well as their personal development. This pursuit of excellence is something that St. Paul's Newman Center encourages and equips students in. This project has the potential to make a long-term impact on the community and our state by forming graduates with a strong, well-rounded foundation who will go forth and strive to make a difference that will long withstand the time we spent here and well extend the boundaries of NDSU. So tonight, as I continue to reflect on these past 4 years, the word that keeps coming to mind is grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for the community I've found at NDSU and St. Paul's Newman Center, and I'm convicted that the decision that is made in this room today may just be the thing that shapes the trajectory of countless young adult lives and our community as a whole. I know that I would not be the individual I am today without my involvement at St. Paul's Newman Center. And this project has the potential to make that true for innumerable future generations of NDSU students and Fargo-Moorhead community members. For these reasons, Commissioners, I strongly urge you to make an investment in tomorrow's leaders by voting in favor of this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll take 2 more speakers. Young man behind the pole, did you want to talk to? You can talk.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you once again for giving us the opportunity to speak on behalf of this incredible project that St. Paul's Newman Center is offering to us today. My name is Nicolette Bitz, and I'm currently a senior, double majoring in psychology and human development and family sciences. I felt it was only fitting to offer a student's perspective during such a crucial decision tonight. College is a turning point in everyone's life where we're given the opportunity to really choose what to put our time, energy, and talents into. Coming into freshman year, I was completely overwhelmed by all of the possibilities that surrounded me. I soon found myself struggling with my mental health, struggling with who I wanted to be as a person, and where I felt I was going to be in the future. Once I began opening up about these struggles, I realized that I was not alone. This caused a drastic change in my future career decisions as I decided to switch my major and become a psychology major. Now, through that, I had the opportunity to work along Dr. Clay Rutledge. He is a nationally known social psychologist, and he spoke deeply to me about the struggles that we're facing our college students today. I've had the opportunity to work in his lab for the past 3 years, and we've discussed deeply the different concerns that students are struggling with, specifically mental health, self-confidence, and just the expectations that students are reaching today. What we've discussed over many research and the things that we've been going over is that a community is essential in forming strong bonds and forming strong leaders for the future. So because of this, I wanted to bring us back to the mission statement of St. Paul's Newman Center: changing hearts, changing lives, and forming future leaders. I'm happy to say that I quite literally feel like a poster child for this statement. My heart was changed at St. Paul's Newman Center from seeking others' approval to seeking joy. My life was changed from chasing other people's expectations to changing my passions. And most importantly, my motivation for being a leader changed from what I could do for me to what I can do for others. My story is completely different from what it could have been if I wouldn't have found the Newman Center, and I know that I'm only a fraction of the percentage of students who have said the same. The Newman Center isn't just a church, a student organization, or an event center, but it's a place where students across campus come to find themselves, to rise above the expectations of what others set for them, and to become the most beautiful version of themselves. This building project allows us to foster the culture we've built up for so many years, giving students a place that they can truly call home in Fargo. I've also been a resident of the Rowers Owned apartment building for the past 2 years and was so excited when I heard of their plan to build alongside the new Newman Center. Rowers has a tremendous reputation of high-quality buildings, renters, and employees. I've always felt safe and cared for in my apartment because of the precautions that Rowers takes to provide for its renters. I'm confident that their involvement with the project will provide safe and affordable housing for the students of NDSU who help to enrich the Fargo community. So tonight, I ask you to consider students like me, those who have been lonely, overwhelmed, and lost, and have found their joy through St. Paul's Newman Center. Consider the change in course that you could provide for any struggling student. Consider the influence your vote has on forming the lives of current and future NDSU students. I'm hopeful and confident that tonight you will use your voice to help change the hearts and the lives of the world's future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rebecca Knutson. I live in North Fargo. Well, we heard from Mr. Bershani from NDSU president, and I'm the president of the Fargo Board of Education. And I want to let you know that my comments here are not on behalf of the board. They're my own personal comments. But I do believe that it is appropriate for us to all consider all students in our public institutions. We've talked a lot about the needs of the students that attend NDSU, and I graduated from NDSU many years ago. But we have other students that want to also live close to the schools that they attend. And those are the students that go to Horace Mann and Roosevelt and our other elementary schools within Fargo. And we try desperately, the Fargo School District, to provide elementary age students with schools as close to where those students live as humanly possible. So I want to offer my support for continuing this conversation. I see that this does not have to be something that will only benefit one institution versus another. I see that this is an opportunity for continued community conversation, and I just encourage you to be in support of continuing the conversation, Mr. Grinberg, that you have suggested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Fisher. I'm a senior at NDSU, and I'm a member over at Newman. If you remember, back in 2015, Samuel Trout was mentioned. He was my roommate, and I actually didn't go home that night. I could have gone home that night he was killed, but the Roosevelt area has, I want to agree with the other side. I've seen the kids walking through those streets, and it was bad, and we've had people going through our backyard, and we'd have to shoo them out. But I just want to say that that's not the Newman Center people who are going through those backyards. I feel that this addition will improve those conditions, as these students, as you've heard, are good students that are not the ones going through and partying and drinking and all that. And also, just living there, I've had experience with my backyard neighbors' houses are all condemned houses, and we've had trouble with people coming in, breaking into those houses and lodging, squatting in those houses. We had trouble. I was interviewed a while back about Sam, and they told me about how the police had raided a house with drugs and guns and stuff in there, and I feel the Newman Center would just be a good addition and would improve the situation there. So.
Thank you. Close public hearing. Have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to continue this till February 11th, and should that be adopted, then I have a few follow-up comments, so I'll make that motion. And along with the lines of my motion, my intent would be to be part of the dialogue between the two parties, including key staff as well as the chair of the Planning Commission, and so that everybody on the back, in the back end of this is in the loop. And I don't know what this ultimately is going to lead to, but if it's another redirect into Planning Commission, they need to be in the loop on the discussions as well. So that would be my intent with the delay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Just so the public knows, Commissioner Garrig is not available for the next meeting, and this takes a 4-5 vote. He would have to be present for the vote. That's why we're delaying it a month. But it also allows for dialogue and people to get through this and hopefully come back with a compromise. Discussion. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to hand it to all you folks that showed up today to let us know where you're at and what you're thinking and what your questions and your concerns are. And that's really vital to the processes that we're all engaged in and involved in. All of us, I'm guessing, have met with all of the parties involved. And my sense is that there is a middle ground that can be aimed for that would reflect a negotiated settlement where the neighbors would be able to live with it and the developers would be able to live with it, the church project would be able to live with it. So I appreciate your motion to continue this discussion. I think it's more important that we get it right than we just get it done, and that we do it with everybody involved that we can, honoring everybody who's a stakeholder, listening to them. I think there's lots of questions to be answered, but I look forward to a proposal coming back in a month that suggests to us that everybody yielded and participated. And one last thing is I think we all like the idea of the townhouses. You know, we're giving up single-family homes. The more townhouses you can build into this proposal, as you're able to, if you're able to, I would encourage that as well.
To the neighborhood, a great dilemma comes to us is density. The commission is struggling a bit now because our governor puts out there that we need vertical density. We're landlocked and the size of the city of Fargo can grow. So this commission is facing that dilemma of where do we grow and how do we grow and how big do we put it or where do we put it. University is a classic example. It's hard to put single-family homes on University, you know that, but we need to transition into the neighborhood somehow. Newman Center, everybody agrees it's a great project. We want to have faith-based housing. We don't disagree with that. You agree with that as well. It's kind of a question of the density and how much we put on that spot. So I ask you all to work with us on this bit because we are relooking at all our neighborhoods. We do have a neighborhood coalition that works with us as well. And the Planning Commission is tasked to try to come up with some solutions. So this is one of those dilemmas is how do we grow and where do we grow? And I appreciate all of you coming out tonight and being part of this conversation. Take a roll call vote, please.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, then, just a few added comments. I do respect everyone's opinions and appreciate the professionalism tonight. You know, one of the things I've learned as a commissioner taking over the planning portfolio is there was a lot of references to mistrust in the city process, developers, against developers, and I think that this dialogue that's taken place on this project has moved us to a higher level of professionalism, and I really appreciate that. That was very loud and clear tonight. As it was 2 years ago, Mr. Enochson, that you were at the podium, and I called in from New York City at a planning conference, and it was about the pro-offit discussion. And some of the things you articulated that night, in my opinion, we have made progress on in the city, and we want to continue to work on that. And I want to take this opportunity to share that, Mr. Lashkowitz shared earlier, adding another city inspector. The voice of dilapidated properties and the city enforcing the code and ordinances to not allow these properties to be run down, to be held up in the neighborhoods, it's made this desk. And if you followed the press and some of the decisions we've made, and we have taken a position to respect private property rights and become more proactive in your concerns on that topic. And so I wanted to say that because I often sometimes with the leadership of the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association or the Hawthorne or the Horse, is sometimes the messaging gets strayed, and I wanted to just make that point tonight that your voices have been heard. And then there's this project that we'll continue to work on. And so again, I just want to thank everyone for being here and being above board and straightforward in this approach. Last week when I met with the leadership of Roosevelt, the notion of compromise was discussed. I think that was Tuesday or Wednesday. And then I learned Friday there was going to be additional meetings. And so tonight just made sense that we continue this so that we didn't have a helter-skelter run at the end trying to find a compromise that didn't make a lot of sense without staff involvement and everybody's full edification of the topic. So again, thank you, everyone.
Other change of scenery is we have a lot of people that want to help rehab homes. We have a variety of programs. Talk to our planning department about that. We have a variety of tax breaks we give as well. We actually have a couple banks coming up trying to give us money to help to go back to the neighborhoods and help you with your single-family homes if you need that. You've been all very polite tonight, very much appreciate that, and if you want to leave now, we are going to talk about the police department, but if you would like to excuse yourselves at this time, that'd be fine, and we'll continue with our meeting.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Bruce Grubb, are you going to explain as far police department, or is the chief? Chief Todd? I think Chief said he wanted to do it. He volunteered, as a matter of fact.
Well, I hope I have an easier topic here for you this evening. Good evening.
You have 3 minutes. No.
Well, you're tough on me. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. About 2.5 years ago, Mayor Mahoney, Commissioner Pipcorn, and Bruce Grubb and I had the opportunity to take a kind of an exploratory tour of the Border States Electric Building at 105 25th Street. Just to walk through there, hosted by Border States, to see what the possibilities were for that building and new police department. And I think after we got done with that tour, we were pretty excited. I think Commissioner Pipcorn was ready to pull the trigger right there and then. But we had a lot of work to do in this, and I just want to take a moment to thank Bruce, who's done a lot of work on subleases and leases and acquisition and furniture acquisition, and then my Deputy Chief Joe Anderson, who's been my detail guy, our project manager for this. So this was a two-phased approach to this project for the Border States. We started back at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, and the negotiations were for a sublease from Border States, who is actually the leaser of that building, of an owner group, and then, of course, eventual purchase of the building in a phased approach. So phase one, we selected an architect, we developed a plan, we selected contractors, and to build in the north half of that building, which was a low ceiling and high ceiling warehouse area, to accommodate one of my divisions, the Field Services Division. And on December 17th, we finished that project and moved the Field Services Division into the north half of that building and became operational. And that was 130 personnel that we moved into that north half of the building. As you can see, that high warehouse area we use for keeping our squad cars, and that's really efficient for us because we used to park our squad cars outside and it'd be 20 below sometimes, and those cars have our computers and everything else, and sometimes it'd take up to 30 minutes for the car to get that computer warm enough to get it to work, as well as some of our other emergency equipment like our AEDs, the batteries in those. So this is not only efficient in that way, but it's right across the street from our gas pumps and the mechanics that work on our vehicles every day. So it's created a number of efficiencies. We also designed locker rooms in that low ceiling warehouse area for our sworn officers, where they get changed and into their uniforms and ready for work. They cross the hallway right into the briefing room, where they get briefed by their supervisors on what's going on for the day, the people to be on the lookout for, stolen vehicles, extra patrols, etc. This briefing room fits about 50 people, whereas our previous one was about 20 people. From the briefing room, they walk right out into the hallway where their duty bags are stored in storage racks. They grab their duty bag and they walk out to the squad cars that you saw before. Another thing that became a possibility for us with the acquisition of this building in the low ceiling warehouse was to build a gym. We're public safety officers. We expect our people to maintain some type of fitness, and this allowed us to do that. We were able to acquire through donations equipment for this gym for our officers to work out, and that's been a real morale booster for our officers. Phase two of this project is something we've been working on since we finished phase one in December of 2017, and we've selected an architect, Schultz and Associates, and he's been fantastic to work with. He's been really engaging to our work groups on what they need for to be operational in a station, and we've been very happy with them. And we are going to fit up the south side of that building now after Border States moves out for the Administrative Division and the Investigations Division. We'll then move, when we take over the whole building, we'll move from a sublease to the full lease of the building from the owners group, and then eventually to the purchase. We have a possibility while the second phase is going on of moving our investigations division into the second floor of this building, because primarily the work will be done just on the first floor of the building, and the second floor is mostly usable as is. So we're pretty fortunate there. So once we get the cabling done and the connectivity, it may be that we can vacate the health department building downtown here and move our whole investigations division upstairs. This project also includes the FF&E, or the purchase of the existing furniture in the building. It's very nice furniture, and that has also been reflected in the 2019 budget. We estimate that we'll be done with this project, hopefully, and moving everybody into this building at the end of August of this year. So this is some of the furniture that is existing within the building. It's all very nice, high-end furniture. It's got a lot of life and usability for us. This is a break room for our personnel. We also have a training room within this building that seats 50 to 60 people, which will be used a lot for us because we train all the time. Upon completion of this project, we'll be moving, if we're fully staffed, up to about 212 full-time employees into this building, which is about 20% of your city workforce. So this is a significant project, and it's a excellent value for the number of people that you're moving into this facility, and those are some of the people that you have listed here.
Did you fill in more people since we have more space? I remember when you were about 180. How did it get up 32?
Well, we have 181 sworn,
Okay.
and then the 24 non-sworn, and then we've combined with several other agencies to do our street crimes team and narcotics.
Don't you oversee this budget?
I talk to you almost every day, sir. So in November of 2018, we published a request for proposals for Phase 2 of the Fargo Police Station. Bids were received on December 19th from 8 general contractors, 7 mechanical contractors, and 8 electrical contractors, which was a really good turnout for this bidding. Based on the bids and the alternates, we recommend the acceptance of the bids and the bid awards listed in front of you on my letter. If you have any questions, I can do my best.
You didn't put that on the slide for the public.
It's all in my letter if they want to come and see it.
What was the total?
The total recommended award is $1,720,700.
And that was with an engineering bid estimate of what? It was over $2 million, wasn't it?
There are some things that aren't part of this bid, but yes, we came in considerably under what we thought we were going to.
Yeah. Questions, Commissioner Pipcorn?
Mr. Chair, so Chief Todd, could you give us a ballpark number? What would have it cost if we would have built a brand-new building like this versus what we spent?
Well, looking at other police departments, it's like St. Cloud, I remember 10 years ago they were at about $23 million. They were a smaller city than us at that time. That's about all I can compare to you right now, but this is a pretty good value.
And Mr. Chair, so that's, the key thing was, and to correct it, my eyes lit up, but not as much as Deputy Chief Osmondson. He was the guy who was like, seriously, you got to tone it down, because the price was going up the more that he talked. He was so excited. But the main thing to look at this is, to buy an existing building like this and to convert it over saved us tons of money. And then on top of that, and I would encourage everybody to go out there, the campus now is maintenance, and there's other facilities out there, they're all right there. And so it's just, it's a great thing. And so I'm so excited, and I do think bang for the buck, this is this is what we should be trying to be doing, so
Yeah,
thanks.
what I should also mention, not only just the efficiencies of our mechanics and the gas, but be on two major thoroughfares of Main Avenue and 25th Street to get to other parts of the city. This property also comes with a parking lot across the street that more than encompasses what we have for employees. So it solves our parking problem.
Commissioner Garrick?
You mentioned that there's things not in this bid. So what are the costs down the road? And we still have to buy the building, right? So what's that cost going to look like, and when's that going to happen?
Well, the building is going to be appraised value at the time of purchase. So Bruce would probably better be able to answer what that would
Does
be.
us upgrading the building increase the value of the building that we're going to have to buy later?
Bruce, you want to speak to that?
That's a good question, but I think this is so industry, police specific that I don't believe that'll be the case. If it was left as just upgraded normal office space, you might run that risk. That's a good question.
Okay. Then the previous question, what costs were left out, or what, you mentioned something to that nature.
Well, based on some recommendations by the architect that we might be just better be going out individually and trying to get what's like signage for the building. We need to probably wire in some cameras and microphones in our interview rooms. So that's what IS is telling us approximately what the cost would be for cameras and microphones. Relocating our evidence shelving. That's shelving that we have. It's rolling shelving that's in our existing evidence room in our downtown headquarters. We're going to take that shelving out ourselves, move that to our new existing our new building, and put it in there so we don't have to buy all new shelving too. So, but there's a relocation of that too.
Some benefits, when we sell the old police station, we'll get some real estate money back for that, for the price we go into the new place. Obviously, Commissioner Gary, the new place is bigger than what we had down.
Sure, and then all I'm getting at is...
And architectural fees.
Sure.
But I just given you the straight bids of what contractors would cost.
Right, so because, when we go incrementally this way, sometimes the price tag goes up quite rapidly. And I just want to be sure that we know what the all-in cost is, and at the end of the day, is that a bargain? And I have no doubt that it will be. But those are things that we have to consider.
And we put in for 2019, we put in, I think, a 1.6 million renovation and 500,000 for fit up. And then we also had the 446 for the FF&E for furniture.
Yeah.
So obviously, we're going to have to work with finances here a little bit with Bruce and the Finance Committee to figure out how that all works, but our bids overall came in significantly lower than we thought they would.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Gary, I remember similar questions when we were on this project a few years ago. Why didn't we just buy the building then? And I still wonder why we didn't prearrange a purchase up front.
We tried.
And my recommendation is we still do that.
We did. If you'll recall, that was the first option that we tried. This building was not owned by Border States Electric. They were leasing from an ownership group called Red River Properties. Got a hold of Red River Properties, and it's a group of gentlemen that are in retirement. They own this building as an investment, and they said, we'd like to lease it for the next 20 years. We talked them down to 5 years, but they said we still need to hang on this as a real estate investment for the cash flow. We're leasing it for the next 5 years, and then we have the option to purchase.
See, and that's my point. I wish we would have had that purchase price arranged up front, even though we knew it was 5 years or 10 years, however many years down the road. And I hope that, my sense is the sooner we expedite that, the more protected the city is.
John, it is, but to their owners, it's when the appraised value at the time of purchase.
I know, but
I agree with you. It'd be great to have a price right now.
We're going in and putting a lot of money into a building I hope we end up owning. And I hope there aren't surprises. That's my only point, is I wouldn't have done this myself that way. I would have proactively known the purchase price up.
Yeah, and the purchase price, of course, we did try to get a price that far in advance. But of course, when you don't know what you don't know, you, as the owner, sometimes you got to err on the side of caution. So it seemed like appraisals seemed to be the fairest way to approach this between seller and buyer, in light of the fact that it needs to be fit up to be a police station and hold ammunition and some things that you typically won't find in an office space, that when you're looking to purchase office space. So we hope that that plays in our favor.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the bids and award the contracts listed for Phase 2 of the Fargo Police Department Headquarters Building.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Chief, good work by your Joe Anderson and all the work you guys have been doing on it. Roll call vote.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Before we get to legislative, I want to go over the two items that were pulled. Item 4, ordinance relating to unlawful snow depositing on private property. This came as a question to me, and it just comes to commissioners if you want to do anything or not. There was a person in our community that has a neighbor that continually puts snow on her property and concerned that there's no ordinance to take care of that. So I'll let Eric at least go through what would have to happen if we want an ordinance, and if the commissioners have no interest in it, I'll drop it. I'm just bringing it up as a concern that somebody continually has a neighborhood that blows snow all over her property, and she has to take care of it herself. So Eric, if you'd explain that part, then I'll let the discussion go.
Sure. Well, and Alyssa Farrell, my assistant city attorney, has been working on this, but just to truncate it, she actually checked with the police department to see how many complaints there were. I was a little surprised to hear the number of complaints. Every time there's, and the story, if I'm getting this correctly, Alyssa, is every time there's a 1-inch snowfall, one particular officer tends to get the kind of complaints, and he'll get quite a few complaints, actually. It amounts to, somewhere between 10 complaints or something like that in a regular snowfall from different neighbors, different areas. A lot of times it's because there isn't a place to put the snow, so they're struggling with that. So I was surprised to hear the number of complaints that you get. I wasn't aware of it as a city attorney anyways. Hadn't heard about it much before. So that's it. The question is the city commissions, whether it's the kind of thing the commission would like to have some regulation on. It can be a little tricky because we broadcast the snow up in the wind, and it ends up on somebody else's yard, sometimes inadvertently, so you have some issues there. But at the same time, the police department, at least at the ones we talk to, it's nice to be able to call somebody and say, stop it, that's against the law. You may not end up having a citation, but at least they can say, you can't intentionally deposit, your snow on somebody else's property.
That would probably be with a fine as well if they did? Is that
Right,
how
yeah.
normally the ordinance would be?
It would typically be handled with some kind of a citation more often than not. Might be, I don't know what the penalty would be, but it could be $50 or...
Commissioner Gehrig, you have some thoughts on it?
Yeah, I pulled this. I've received one complaint via email. I don't know how many of you guys have received this year. One complaint from me that has been brought to my attention. Enforceability for me stands out instantly. How do you prove that a neighbor threw snow on their property when we have wind? And things change out there in a heartbeat. You can do your driveway, and then 5 minutes later, it's all gone, or it's all there, whichever way. And then are we going to have to require proof? Are we going to be videotaping people? How are we going to do that? You can't legislate good neighbors. You got to be able to talk to your neighbors. I guarantee you that most people who have problems with their neighbors throwing snow on their lawn haven't talked to their neighbors. And I can't, as a commissioner, force you to go talk to your neighbor. You have to go do that. My house, I live in Roosevelt. My house, the driveway runs the entire depth of my home. My garage is in my backyard, and I have to blow that out. So when I moved into that house, I spoke to my neighbor, Jack, and I said, can I blow snow onto your yard? Because I don't know where else to put it. He said, well, yeah, where else are you going to put it? He just said, don't hit my house. Okay, good idea. That's what being a neighbor is. That's what being a neighborhood is. So I'm not going to legislate how you need to interact with people. It's a civil matter. If water from my sub pump goes on your grass, there shouldn't be a law for that. It should be a civil matter. You should be adults about it. And I hope this doesn't go anywhere.
Commissioners?
Feel the same way.
Be good neighbors. We don't need an ordinance. Mr. Strand?
Well, it's an interesting concept. The issue I hear more about, and this isn't a criticism, is the city plows putting snow on people's private property and driveways. And
Well, John, let's not pass an
And
ordinance
I know
on that.
I'm working with Ben to try to get gates on the plows, but
So I take it, we'll leave it as it is. I'm fine with that. I just brought it up as an issue or a question. Item number 7, Commissioner Pepcorn.
So obviously, I was alarmed when I see on the consent agenda refugees screening for tuberculosis, because 3 years ago, we were told that the refugees that come here are screened, and so there aren't going to be issues like that. And so my question is, how many refugees have tuberculosis? And so let's start with that. I have a lot more things to say. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So as most of you are probably aware, per century code, we are responsible with the Fargo Cass Public Health and the North Dakota Department of Health for TB treatment and case management for all residents of Cass County. This grant money that's coming through is coming for the Office of Refugee Resettlement under their medical screening and TB follow-up visits. That then is funneled through Lutheran Social Services, which then has come to the local level where we do TB case management. We don't participate in the medical screenings. We get referrals after they are done with their screenings. So this money particularly is for support of our interpreting costs for when we see refugee clients for TB case management.
But to Dave's questions, how many refugees come in states with TB?
So if we look at our 2018 numbers, we had 138 cases of tuberculosis case management. Of those, 97% they were latent TB infection. So that means it is not transmissible to other people. You can only transmit the disease if there is active disease. So of our 97%, there was less than 18% that were actually considered refugees. We had 5 active cases in Cass County in 2018, of which none were refugees.
So part of the question, Dave, on the disease is TB is latent disease. A lot of people can test positive for it, but they don't actually have it, nor can they spread it. But they have to track those people because it can become an active disease. So part of what the issue is, you have to monitor these people and follow these people. We don't have a lot of TB in our county. We have a really, that's a small amount. But you have to see people and test them and see them. So this is just paying for interpretive services to follow up on those people. Go ahead.
We would have to do this service regardless if we got funding or not.
Yeah, so you're the doctor, so I don't want to, but I did research, and so here's the deal. We have to stop allowing refugees into Fargo until we screen them. We should stop that today. Like we should, I'll be making a motion that we stop allowing refugees to be placed in Fargo until we do health screenings. We were told this was happening 3 years ago. Clearly, it's not, because here's the deal. Like you said, TB, if you had the latent kind, it's not, then it doesn't transfer. However, it can turn into active TB. Do you know when it can? Anytime. Anytime. You can't predict it. So we are having refugees come to Fargo with TB? Yes, we are. Isn't that correct?
We had 2018, there were no refugees with active TB. When a person has active TB, they actually have symptoms of illness. So you are able to look at people and tell that they are physically sick.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to be making a motion that we stop having refugees come to Fargo until we screen them. And I want the health department to come up with the list of what we want to have screened. Because if we don't, we are responsible. Because here's the thing, TB can kill you. And if you're an infant or a senior citizen, your immune system isn't as strong, you're the most susceptible. I'm telling you, man, this is not a joke. And to me, you should have alerted us immediately that we had refugees with TB, because we should have stopped this as soon as we heard about it. This is putting our citizens' lives in jeopardy. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
We did not have active cases in the refugee population.
We have refugees with TB, correct? And that TB can turn into active TB, and you can't predict it. Isn't that correct? So, I mean, come on, man. So I'm just saying, here's my motion, and I'll try not to get emotional during my motion. We need to stop refugee acceptance immediately. We need to have our health department come up with a screening system and have them screened before they are allowed to live here. Because if we don't, people will die. That's no joke.
Okay, so just statistically, let me put this a little bit in perspective. So in the United States, there were 528 deaths with active tuberculosis. There were 80,000 influenza deaths. So we should be more concerned about influenza than we should be with TB, because statistically, that's what's going to impact you more.
But the reality is, Desi, all but refugees that come into the United States are screened. They all have health
They are
screening.
screened,
You're all
and we do
screened
not
for TB.
participate in medical screening. That is done by our medical community. We do TB case management, which means that they have seen a provider, they have been given a prescription for medication. We take it at that point. We do not get involved with screening.
Mr. Gehring.
Eric, just as a matter of the motion, do we have the legal authority to even do that?
Well, I was thinking about that question, and I kind of took the motion to be where he's directing the health department to figure out a means of, by doing it, I thought in the process of that, we'd figure out whether there's a point where city government and the health department can interject itself if you want it to. And then the other question is just, I'm not totally certain the extent to which placement of refugees is under the control of the city of Fargo totally. But I thought we would evaluate that depending upon the results of Commissioner Pepcorn's motion.
Is there a second?
I would just add, I am 99.99999% sure we cannot make that happen and stop at the city commission level.
Is there a second? Could we perhaps just have a discussion about that evaluation or question of the TB, whether they're coming in or not? Or
Yeah,
any
I
other
mean, we
further
can,
discussion, Desi, you have to do for?
I mean, we can follow up with Lutheran Social Services. I think, the data supports that they are doing those screenings. I mean,
Just check to see what they do to bring people
Sure.
in.
Mr. Chairman, so that's what happened 3 years ago. We were assured that refugees were screened, and so obviously they're not. I mean, and
Oh,
so.
they are, Dave. They're screened. Here's the deal. Somebody with TB could walk into our community any time of the day. They're not regulated at all, and that's really the problem we have. If somebody has TB and is a U.S. citizen, they can walk into any community they are and they can spread TB.
That is 100% correct, but here's the difference. The refugees are being brought here, and we were told that they were going to be screened, and they're not.
Well, they are screened.
They are being screened?
Yes.
They are being screened.
And they're being allowed to come here with TB?
No.
There's a really big difference, and I would encourage you to read the difference between TB infection and TB
I have
disease.
Mayo right here, and what Mayo says is, even if it's not active TB, it can turn active like that. Isn't that correct? That says it right here. So
It's
if
really
we
not
can't predict when it's going to happen, and there's people with TB in Fargo, that's very scary.
And exposure to active TB takes a prolonged period of time for someone to convert to active. So this isn't like measles where, it's highly, highly contagious.
I wish I could tell you that's reassuring, but.
Well, what she's telling you, influenza is more deadly, and we're exposed to that all the time.
So get your
And
flu
risk of
shots.
dying from TB versus influenza. Influenza is about 100 times.
And so let's bring people here that have active TB. That's a.
They're not doing that, Dave. They're
Yes,
screening.
we are.
No, I know you're worried about it, but it's one of those diseases in medicine we all hate because it could turn active very easily, but we don't have control. I'll move it to the last item. We have to motion on whether or not to fund this or take the funding for this. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? For the interpretive services. It's a grant that she's received. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Strand?
Yes.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. The last question is just a discussion on legislative issues. So there's a new program out there in which all the legislative issues which the staff picks up can be shared with the commissioners. and anything that's go to high alert or a question or something that they put out there as, hey, this is something you might be concerned about, blah, 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 the commissioners will receive. And then on some issues, the question is do we need to vote on them? So if there's a controversial issue on the commission that we have, and we're going to go out to Bismarck and portray what we want or don't want as a commission, there may be something that gets your heartburn when you read it and says something. I'll give you an example. Eminent domain might be out there. And some of you may have one idea or some have the other. But when I speak to the Bismarck, I'm trying to speak for the City of Fargo and the commission. So in some questions, there may be a debate amongst us all what our position is. So what I've asked is that Bruce and his team will tee up legislative issues, and we used to go by every one of them, bring this to the commission. The question would be to you as a group, would it make more sense, something high alert or some question that we may want to enter in, or you as a commissioner might say, hey, I want to know what our commission feels on this. Here, I'm firmly against it, but I want to know what the rest of you feel. And then if Tony Grinberg wants to go out and testify for it, and we don't agree with him, he can go not identifying, I'm a commissioner, but this isn't the commission's view. Here's what the view of the City of Fargo is. So the question is, or we could go to the old style, and for some of our commissioners before, all our heads of departments would go line by line, here's a bill, here's a bill, here's a bill, are we for or against? The staff will follow present policy. If there's a policy out for that particular issue, they will follow what our present policy is. So Commissioner Pepcorny has TIFs and how those are. They'd follow the official TIF policy of the City of Fargo. If you want something different, it's just a question to you, because we could spend another half hour going over legislative issues. And Bruce, I'll call you up just if I'm capturing it right. But it's your preference. And Tony, you've been here a while too. Commissioner Goering, you want to speak to it? Or?
Mr. Chairman, can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
So we have to have a vote on the snow thing. And so before we move on, do you mind if we either have a motion or not to have?
Well, everybody didn't want it, so it died for lack of a motion.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt, but we just want.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think what you're saying is a good idea to have a dashboard or whatever else of the hot topics, so we can pick and choose what we want to bring forward. And as long as we're exposed to what it is, I can at least say I knew about it before we.
And then John also instructed to send an email to all of you of different bills that are coming forward. And again, if there's something that you're excited about, please bring it to our attention. We will, after every session, we'll stop at the end and say legislative issues, and you might say, hey, I want to talk about this. If you'd warn us before we get into the meeting so can I have the right experts in the audience, because otherwise, Chief Todd, what's going on here? If he's not here, he won't know which bill you're talking about. But Bruce?
Well, there were two items that we met as department heads last Thursday and talked about how do we want to track things through this legislative session. And, when you've got, I think as of today, there were over 500 bills, a lot of reading there. But as a group, we decided that every department head would read all the bills. And as the subject matter expert, representing a certain department, they would create their own list. This is working off the North Dakota legislative website, really easy to use. Each department head would create a list. Camber, with the help of Steve Dirksen, would merge those into one master list that we would send an update out every Friday, along with a list of the next week's hearing schedule. And then we thought, I'm certainly willing to come up every 2 weeks. You kind of get off track a little bit because with legislative hearings every week, things move really quickly. And I think 2 years ago during the session, I can't remember who exactly, but somebody said, Mr. Grubb, I don't need you to read this stuff to me. I'm capable of reading. So I want to maximize your time. I'd be happy to come up and give a quick report if you'd like. But one thing for sure, we thought we could provide an updated master list and the upcoming hearing schedule. So if you decide you'd like to go out to Bismarck and provide testimony, you can. If there's something you'd like to discuss, let us know, and we'll get it out in front of you for discussion.
Okay. Mr. Strand.
Thank you. My general sense is, and you alluded to it, Mayor Mahoney, that as long as the folks going to testify or present reflect our existing practices and policy, I'm fine with that. Another thought I'll just interject in there is, say something happens with guns and our police chief goes out there, or or conceal and carry, or say something happens with tuberculosis and our Director of Health goes out there. I'm not going to micromanage the directors of our departments of what their expertise is, in my view. You know, from just my perspective, I think they have their expertise, and we oughtn't to be surprised that Fargo has folks going there and presenting expert testimony. Now, if something comes our way that we need to address proactively, like say somebody's presenting a policy about taxes or incentives or TIFs or pilots or caps, then we put it on our agenda, maybe, or vet it at our own levels if it's critical to us going back to the legislature. But I certainly don't want to micromanage all of our departments and department heads and spokespersons relative to Fargo.
Yeah, I mean, to
Commissioner
add to Commissioner Strand's point and Bruce's comments, you know, I guess I liken it, it's very fluid, so things move fast. So day one it says this, day two it says that. But, you know, as we empower staff to monitor and the slew of bills that are introduced, what's level one, what's highest priority, 2, 3, you know, we should be talking about, you know, ones that are really concerning, you know, 2s and 3s, you know, a lot of that just sifts its way out through the legislative process. Prairie dog, for example. If that comes to be, that's a huge impact to us and how we can reduce specials. So that's something that we should all be, you know, understanding what's going on. That's just one example. Or eminent domain, which could have an impact on city growth. Those are the kind of the magnitude things that we really need to be, you know, oh, by the way, alert. You know.
Flood protection.
Yep, yeah, that too.
And water.
Thank you, that's good for input. So if anything comes up, feel free to contact Bruce if you want some particular bills pulled and talked at this level. Is there any other business of the commission?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your patience tonight.